In this video, I'm going to use these two maps over here. On this map is a French map, and this map shows the political situation around 1820, when the independence movement against Spain was at its peak in the Caribbean. For example, here you can read Colombia. That means Colombia. Why? Because the viceroyalty of New Granada and the Kingdom of Venezuela, which was two Spanish territories, were joined together as one as the Republic of Colombia by Simon Bolivar. Alright? The viceroyalty of New Spain wanted to become independent as the Mexican Empire that was going on, and the Kingdom of Guatemala was still pro-Spain, at least amongst the elite, so it still remained Spanish. And the Caribbean kingdoms of Spain, the Caribbean islands, remained with Spain. Florida, of course, was already sold to the United States in 1819, just like Oregon was. And the Louisiana Purchase, in which the United States purchased the Louisiana territory from France. Well, you can see it here that they already divided territory into new states. All right. Now, why am I showing this map? I'm not showing this map to talk about 1820. I'm using this as a parable. I want you to imagine the following. You go back to, let's say, 1550, okay, in the mid-16th century. You leave Spain. You leave from Seville towards Cadiz. In Cadiz, you take a ship, and after 3.5 weeks, you arrive at this island over here, which is Spanish called Puerto Rico. The rich door, or the door towards riches, however you want to interpret it. When you arrive there, you probably smell because you haven't taken a bath or a shower for weeks. You're probably exhausted also, or seasick. So you want to go to an inn. Okay, that's how they called hotels back then. So you arrive there, the captain hands over his documentation, his shipping documents, and you're allowed into the port. You go to the inn, you rest, you take a shower, you get some food, but you need to pay for it, so you take a job locally. Let's say you're a migrant and you want to settle in Puerto Rico. You're here, you came with your family. So you go to the Audiencia de Puerto Rico, that was a royal court of Puerto Rico that the Spanish established, and you register yourself. You are assigned a plot of land and you're expected to be productive. Why? Because the Spanish established a country over here, so they had barracks because the military was there. They had a government, the Audiencia de Puerto Rico, and they also had the Catholic Church over there, so you had a bishop with churches. All of these had to be maintained economically, so the Spanish wanted to have an economy. So all the natives that were left, as well as the colonists that came from Spain or elsewhere from Europe, had to become economically active. Because the Spanish understood Puerto Rico is like 3.5 weeks at the other side of the ocean, and from Madrid by land towards there is like 4 weeks or 4.5 weeks. So we can't keep that place dependent on Madrid. Practically, it won't work. So to keep that area Spanish, you ought to make it autonomous. You ought to establish an autonomous country that's led by the Navy on the behalf of Spain. That's how they did. That's how Spain established countries in the Americas, which they called captaincies generals. A captaincy general is a military name for a kingdom, because the captain general, which is a marine, is appointed by the king. And if the king is not directly there, it's appointed by the viceroy that acts on behalf of the king. So Spain established the Kingdom of Puerto Rico, also established the Kingdom of Santo Domingo. Over here, he also established the Kingdom of Cuba. And Florida, because Florida was often terrorized by hurricanes, they decided not to establish a country over here, but they made Florida a province of Cuba. Okay? Yeah, you had the Kingdom of Guatemala, which they established. You had the Kingdom of Yucatan, which belonged to Guatemala, but the Mayans here wanted to become independent, so the Spanish granted their wish. You had the Kingdom of Mexico, which was a former Aztec Empire reformed in a Catholic way. The Kingdom of New Galicia, and from here, from this kingdom, from this country, they traded with with the Chinese Empire, but in order to trade effectively with the Chinese, established the Kingdom of the Philippines. Today, the Philippines still exists, but as a republic. That's why you have those Filipinos with Spanish surnames. They established the Kingdom of New Leon, Kingdom of New Santander, Kingdom of New Biscay, and the Californias were supposed to become a kingdom, but that never worked out. But later, the Spanish did sail on into the Northern Pacific and established Oregon, or the Kingdom of Oregon. But okay, this is about North America. Why did the Spanish do this? As I mentioned before, my tour is all the way there on the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, and the Iberian Peninsula had two administrations, the Crown of Castile and Leon and the Crown of Aragon, or Catalonia, what we call today. Both crowns had their own traditions. The Crown of Aragon was more focused on the Mediterranean, trade also with what we today call the Middle East, and the Crown of Aragon also had territories in the south of Italy. So the Crown of Aragon also included the Italians that lived in the south, from Rome below. And from one period, there was a period that it also controlled the northwest of Italy, where today Milan is seated. So there was the Crown of Aragon, which was governed by the Catalans, and then you had the Crown of Castile, which was governed from Madrid. And in each crown, you had several countries, okay? So in the Crown of Leon, you had Galicia, you had Sevilla, you had Cordoba, you had all those small countries that were all governed by the King of Castile. And the King of Castile was also King of Aragon. So, for example, I believe Ibiza was also a kingdom for a while. Then it turned into the Kingdom of the Balears. Also, you had the Kingdom of Valencia. So you had those kingdoms over there. Also, the Kingdom of Sicilia, Kingdom of Sardinia, which were the Italian parts. They were governed by the Catalans on behalf of the King of Castile, was also King of Aragon. So mainland Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, was not a country in itself either. It wasn't a country. They were a union. So as a union, you couldn't establish, how do I say, direct colonies, because a direct colony belongs to a country. So if you had Galicians come here establishing a country, would be a Galician colony. But then all the other countries of Castile think we have nothing to do with it. So Spain was a code name for the Crown of Castile and the Crown of Aragon together. So they established Spanish territories, which were different than what they had in Europe. So they had to do something new. So they established countries over here based on the habitations of the Indian tribes over here. And that's how they did it. Why am I mentioning this? Is it to praise colonialism? No. I want to point out to you that those Spaniards back then were very practical. They knew once we go there, we can't just establish a small port with a village and we steal stuff from there and we bring back the gold to Spain. That's not going to work. And they also remember that the Spanish Navy was also an expensive enterprise, so it needed to maintain. So also the Spanish soldiers, or the Spanish troops, would require some benefit for them. So they had to come with a structure and with institutions that would last for decades and for generations. That's why they established countries, which were kingdoms governed by the King of Spain through the Viceroy that was located in Mexico City, and the Viceroy was assisted by the Marines, who were established as the heads of those countries, the Captain Generals. The same did in South America. And by doing this, and establishing the Kingdom of the Philippines, you now had direct access to the economy of the Chinese Empire, and a lot of abundance and wealth came across the Pacific into Mexico towards Spain. So they thought this out. Well, if you look at, for example, the Portuguese, primarily, they came and established a small settlement for themselves, only for Portuguese people, for Portuguese sailors, and once they were done, they would just abandon it. That's how the Portuguese did. Eventually, the Portuguese remained with Portuguese America, which they call Brazil, and they had to invest, because they knew if they wouldn't invest, pirates would come. Spain knew pirates would come, so they established marine bases everywhere. And they made sure that an economy going on. That's why everyone had to learn Spanish. They established universities, established schools, they built infrastructure, they established, let me say, those fraternities where you could be taught into an economic discipline. So the natives that lived over here, they became Spanish, they learned the Spanish language, they also kept their native language also, but they were involved. And because we're involved, they invested in it also. So it also became their new Spain also. So they had to include the people in order for their enterprise to succeed. They knew that they couldn't do it as the Portuguese, they come somewhere, take stuff away, and expect people to take it. Eventually, they did take stuff away, but they figured out they need their American kingdoms. Spain went bankrupt several times, and were the American kingdoms, which locally were governed by the native elites, that sometimes also mestizo elites, because they mixed with Spanish, the Marines. They were the ones who had to help Spain out. So Spain extended itself and established a whole civilization. All right? Until this day, Spanish is one of the main languages in the world. Now, why this video? Why this map? It's a parable. And you know, with me, when I give a parable, is to teach you something. The Spanish rulers back then, I'm not saying they were wise in everything they did. They did some dumb stuff also. By the way, Spain as a nation still does dumb stuff today, but I'm not going to talk about that. What they did was they looked at the bigger picture. They realized we have like 6 million people living in the Iberian Peninsula. There's crime amongst us. We can use the new world to dump a lot of people, but also to have an income, because we're broke here. By the way, Spain was broke when they began all this whole enterprise. So we need to look beyond and do wise investments. Take wise risks. That's what they did. Spain, though that union was bankrupt when they began all of this, yet they succeeded and they continued. Why? They looked at the bigger picture. Okay? The Dutch, at the other hand, got this enormous fleet. Their fleet was bigger than that of Spain, and they had the biggest fleet in the whole world. They went to what they call Suriname, or they call or better said, the Guyana areas. They went to a place called New Amsterdam, which was later named New York. They went to the south of Africa. They went to Ceylon, today we call Sri Lanka. They went to Australia, what today called New Zealand. They went to the East Indies. They went everywhere. But they only established small forts for themselves, for the exclusive use of the Dutchmen. And it worked. That golden age, a lot of income, but it collapsed very quickly. Okay? Now look, the ones with money, the Dutch that established a big fleet, they didn't last for long. While Spain, that was broken and turned and divided, they lost it. Why? They looked at the bigger picture. They looked at the whole situation. They realized we need to establish ourselves over there. So they established the marine bases so that every pirate or sailor, there wasn't just sailors also, but every pirate, everyone on the sea that would enter the Caribbean would know Spain is here. Whether you like the Spanish or not, you like the language or not, Spain is here. Spain has its kingdoms over here. So, if you're there, you better be kind towards the Spanish, because Spanish are everywhere. Okay? While the French were only located in several places. The Dutch only in several places. Spanish spread all around. They made sure they were established. Now, look at it this way. And now I'm going to translate to daily life. Okay? When you have a group of people that agree on something that's powerful. Okay, let's say you have a village. Now, maybe not a village. Let's say you have a neighborhood in a city. And the neighborhood is homogeneous. All right? And those people want to keep the neighborhood homogeneous. What will they do? They will treat anyone that's not from their ethnic background hostile. If you want to get a job there, people take you at the job and you see your last name. It's not of their native background, they decline you. By agreeing with such stuff together, even though it may be against the law, they are preserving their homogeneous culture in that part of town. And it's practical, it works. They establish themselves as this homogeneous community that don't want any mingling happening over there. And because they're persistent in it, it works. Even if it's against the law, the government realizes to force people to accept migrants is going to become ugly. So eventually they succeed in it. Alright? But let's say now, you have this migrant that's assigned a home over there. Let's say this migrant is a pagan. He arrives there. But before he arrived, he went to a fortune teller. And the fortune teller told him, Diego, let's say that migrant's name is Diego. Diego, the people living here can't stand foreigners. Even though your skin is a bit light, they may not really want you there. But you can remain there, but you'll have to put these people under bondage on a daily basis. And Diego agreed with it, said, okay, I'm doing it. So Diego arranged a meeting with the real estate agent and he purchased the home. When he arrived in the home, and the home was still empty, he lit his candles and he did his paranormal rituals over there. And he placed a guard of unclean spirits around his property that hindered any thief or any vandal from coming close. Anytime a thief or a vandal, anyone with bad intentions came close, because when someone has bad intentions, that vibration is sensible in their energy field. So you don't have to read their mind, you can sense the vibration that they have bad intentions. When demons sense a bad intention from people and they were approaching Diego's property, the demons who had access to those people, because when they're negative, would send fright into their bodies. And those people would just back off from the property. That's how Diego and his family, even some of his cousins that came over from abroad, lived over there. And they listened to Hispanic music, they had their Spanish lifestyle over there in that homogeneous community, and nobody bothered with them. Some of the locals even became friends with him. Something they naturally want to do. What happened there? Diego established himself in that community. So that everyone knew you can't exclude Diego. If you exclude Diego, there will be losses. Why? Because Diego, after a while, also supported one of his migrant friends to open a shop over there. So after 3 years, there were like 4 shops opened in the neighborhood. But Diego was not the owner of those shops, but he was the one financially backing them. So in practice, he was the owner of the shop. And those migrants that he financed knew what Diego was doing. So people after a while knew this Diego is like a godfather figure, man. You can't go against him or exclude him, pretend he's not there, because it will backfire. And here's the thing, Diego also became the central figure for other migrants that had difficulties. So after a while, more migrants moved over there. So after a while, like 30% of that neighborhood was a migrant. 30% were migrants. And all the migrants knew, if you have issues, go to Diego's family, they will help you out. Diego established himself. Let's say Diego was an atheist, he was so-called normal. He would arrive there not knowing how hostile people are, and within 2 years, after being on the side attacks and having financial difficulty, he would have to leave. Okay? In this case, Diego was a pagan, established himself. That's why, even though there was resistance, the resistance couldn't remove him. But to keep that going, he had to remain paranormally active. Because he knew the moment I'm not paranormally active anymore, the shield disappears, the shield dissolves, and man, the flood of accusation, flood of rage would overcome me. He knew that. Now in this parable, this Diego is practical. Remember what I told you about Spanish colonization? They were looking at the bigger picture. This Diego looked at the bigger picture. He realized I need to be necessary and needed and significant in this community for me to remain here. So Diego didn't try to win people's favor, because by doing that he would put them on a pedestal. He would make them kind of powerful, which they weren't. He also couldn't just ignore the people because they were in the majority. That could also backfire with fatal consequences on his wealth and above his kids. So he realized, I need paranormal aid. And he used the paranormal aid in order to establish himself as part of the community and even became a dominant figure in that community. And he's a pagan, okay? What about believers? Why aren't believers like Diego? Okay? A lot of believers, I'm not saying all, but a lot of believers, especially those that are still stuck in pagan Christianity, they go to their job, come home, they're kind towards everyone, they keep their mouth shut, they don't mind other people's business, they make sure they're out of the way of other people, and they go to church every Sunday, sing hallelujah, and that's it. They have no impact, they have no significance, they have none of that in the community. Yet they think it's strange, you don't reach anyone for Christ. Were the apostles in the first century like that? No. You had James, one of those apostles, that he was so into Spain. Spain was called Hispania back then. From Hispania we have the word Spain today. So Spain, that region, contains 3 Roman provinces, Lusitania, Tarraconensis, and Baetica. Baetica was a very wealthy province of Rome. Lusitania, also quite wealthy, but Tarraconensis was this big region which had its differences. But anyway, Spain back then during Rome's time was quite productive. Rome needed Spain. And you know what? This James, he sailed to Spain on his own. Probably with his wife, if he had any, but he went to Spain. He traveled around sharing the gospel. Eventually, the pagans there cast him out of Spain. So he had to come back, and when he came back, well, he had this King Herod, this was Herod Antipas, that killed him. That executed him with a sword. I mean, the Roman soldiers did. What did the apostles do afterwards? Some of the apostles, also some of the other believers, they took his corpse, they sailed with it to Spain, and they buried him over there. That's why in Spain and also in Portugal, Santiago, the Spanish Santiago, Portuguese, that's why the name Santiago is so famous over there. When the Catholics took over, they realized that James left an heritage, so they had to use it to keep hold on the people. That's why in most Hispanic countries today, Santiago is well known either as a name of a town, a state, or the capital. For example, you have Santiago de Chile, that's the capital of Chile. I mean, all of that as the result of this James that had an interest in Spain and went for it. Alright? So this James, as I would say, established himself in Spain back then. Even though it wasn't as successful as he intended, his efforts lasted. Alright? And future generations could not get around his influence, no matter how much he tried to forget about him. You know what I'm saying here? I think you get it already. As a believer, your destination is earth. Even after the resurrection of Christ returns, you'll come back to earth. So in the here and now, you walk in life and abundance. You are established in Christ. So you ought to work out, no, I'm saying not to work, you ought to live out this establishment in the here and now. Look, I made a lot of videos in relation to this already. Just be like this Diego in that parable. Don't go trying to seek approval from others. Don't go to intimidate others like pagans tend to do and it works for them. Look at the bigger picture. Make sure you're significant, relevant, needed, and unavoidable. Anyone tries to avoid you, doesn't like you, have a will against you, wants anything to do with you, it will backfire onto them. That's how you ought to be. Be like that. And you'll succeed in everything you do, and even if a project of yours fails, that failure will work out in a success anyway. Agree with Christ. Be at peace.